then going to the barbershop, sitting around.
That's why it's crazy we chose the name Klippah Talk.
I was about to say, I ain't that. It's a nice little.
Inside of him exists that man. You got to get out of that comfort zone.
I think that's it. All right. Welcome to another edition of Klippah Talk. Today we'll be featuring Mr. Mo Abusaft. And I like to kick it off today by first, I don't want to call out his accolades, but what I'm going to ask him to do is I'm going to ask him to introduce himself and give us a little bit of the background of who he is, where he's from, and what made him want to get into the profession that he chose.
Absolutely. Well, first, I appreciate being here, being welcome. This is actually my first podcast I've ever done, so we're breaking new ground together here at Klippah Talk. But I'm Mo Abusaft, Mo Abusaft for short. I'm an attorney in Spartanburg, South Carolina, also a business owner, and I am one of two elected Democrats in Spartanburg County. I'm the District 1 representative on Spartanburg County Council, one of 7 members. I represent about 55,000 people in the areas of the city of Spartanburg, Una, Arkwright, Roebuck, and more areas in Spartanburg County.
Okay. Now, given that, my next question I would like to ask you, was there any event that occurred during your life, whether it was family-oriented or a situation that you perceived that made you want to get into law and made you want to, when you got into law, take the avenue that you took?
I don't know if it was a particular family event. As long as I can sort of remember back, I've been interested. My two sort of twin interests, and or three interests have been religion, law, and politics. And sort of law and politics oftentimes dovetail. So those were always my interests. And so I thought about pursuing a joint degree where I would get my Master of Divinity in Law degree, but decided not to do that. And so I used my law degree still to fulfill that interest. I'm the church attorney for my church is Mount Moriah Baptist Church, one of the historical black churches going back to the 1860s in Spartanburg. And so I fulfilled that interest through my law degree. But as long as I can remember, I was drawn to law and politics. I remember watching The West Wing as a little boy. I'm sure that some of my family background plays some role. There's, like most people of color, incarceration has affected my family.
Yes.
Most of the men in my family on my mother's side have been incarcerated. My father is in law enforcement. He's a superintendent in the Georgia Department of Corrections, which makes him a functionally equivalent to a warden. But so I'm sure having a family that's dealt with incarceration so heavily probably played some role in where I wanted to go.
Now, being in law, would you say that, I wouldn't say racial prejudice, but I would say systemic issues and roadblocks that have been a part of this nation since we've been here, would you say that played a role in disenfranchising a lot of people that look like us?
Certainly. I mean, look, systemic discriminations are at the root of a lot of things, that one of the issues that we're dealing with, and people don't oftentimes identify that, right? The Bible says that we don't deal with flesh and blood, but spirits and principalities.
Right.
And so much of what we see the end result. We see the person who is, incarcerated for stealing from the store. But we oftentimes don't track that backwards to the issues of poverty that are not just happenstance, but are created by systems that benefit a certain caste system in this country. So we see the end result and we blame the end person, and they certainly play some role in their own decisions, but we oftentimes don't see the system. So right. You will hear people talk about the metaphor of the crabs in the barrel.
Right.
But guess what? Crabs aren't born in barrels.
Right.
So the systematic oppression is the barrel. right? Crabs don't pull on each other generally because guess what? They're spread out in a huge ocean.
Right.
But put them in a barrel and they act differently. And people oftentimes don't identify. They identify the bad action at the end. They oftentimes don't identify the system that creates the bad action, and they almost never identify the person benefiting who's implementing the system that creates the bad action.
So you could say, in reference to that, would you say that would be a result of not only bad choices, but a lot of times I can say our community, we have short-term goals versus seeing the long picture. And I'm gonna use an example of drug dealing. A lot of people look like us. They'll get involved in criminal activities to solve their short-term issues. And solving the short-term issues, it created a long-term effect, not only on that individual, but his family and the community in which he lives. So would that be, in reference to the crabs in the barrel, would you say our short-term decisions and instead of having long-term visions, would that be the barrel that we're creating for ourselves?
Yeah.
Well, I think delayed gratification is one of the biggest skills that we can ever teach our next generation. Is that making short-term sacrifices for long-term goals is important. I think, but I don't think we create the barrel. I think the barrel is the systematic oppression that then we are oftentimes making that creates the context in which the decisions are made. And so it's very easy to hyper focus on the last bad decision, right? Or in your story, it's sort of the drug dealer in your example. But what has created the environment in which a young person, of all the ways you can make money, would want to choose a way of making money that subjects you to incarceration and to violence every day, right? Unless we really think that there's, that young people of color and I think we ought to be clear. Let's remember that white youth are using and selling drugs at higher rates than black youth. Right. They're not incarcerated at higher rates than we are. And so sometimes we perpetuate our own negative narrative, right? But I think that is overlooked. And that's your barrel. Because a young white person can oftentimes make the mistakes of delving in drug selling or drug use during high school and college. I mean, if you've been in a high school or college in the last 20, 30 years, a person will pop to your mind that was engaging in that sort of conduct or engaging in other high risk conduct, but then they're allowed to prosper after that, right? No one treats them as if their life should be derailed, when oftentimes when young black kids make those mistakes, especially black males, they then enter into a system that wants to treat them as dangerous and wants to then find a way to sort of incarcerate them and create a legacy that's going to stick with them forever and sort of takes them out of a path to be successful in a way that our white counterparts really don't experience. But again, I mean, I think it's important to understand, what is it that's going on in a community where you would voluntarily pick a type of way of generating income that subjects you to losing your freedom and to be constantly at risk of violence, right? Something has gone wrong unless you're somehow suggesting that community is like they're not reasonable human beings, right? That want to have the same things as the rest of other cultures, right? It just doesn't make any sense. Humans want to be happy. They want to be safe.
Right.
They want to be able to have freedom. And so what is it that's gone so bad to a community that you would choose this path? And people don't want to engage with that question, right? Because then we all become sort of caught up in that.
Right.
We all have some responsibility to that. Is that because we've underfunded educational systems? Is that, have we taken the good jobs away from this community? Have we over-policed but under-protected that community? What is driving that? Which is a much harder question than just saying, oh, this young person is a bad actor and let's fill them up. We'll just fill up these jails and absolve ourselves of any connection with it.
Okay. Well, with that being said, systemically, we can look, if we were to gauge our community from slavery to the present, and while gauging from slavery to the present, we see a culture change to where we became more into entertainment. And as we gravitated more to entertainment, our leaders, they start looking to our leaders in the entertainment industry. And I'm tying this in to say that a lot of our entertainment creates a culture that leads to the type of situations that we're talking about. Because most of the music, the genre of music is either abusing our women or engaging in criminal activities. The movies, everything that is attached to us is given a negative connotation. So, and in saying that, I also am noticing, like, I was watching The Pivot the other day, and I observed the shirt that one of the gentlemen were wearing, and it was saying, change the culture. Do you think that changing of the culture and identifying, and I'm gonna tie this in with the systemic racism that I always speak of, the lack of fathers in the home, the lack of discipline, the lack of family structure, with all this, could we trace that back to the root of the demise of what we're looking at now? Would you say that that plays a major role into the entertainment industry being able to influence our young men and women that leads them on this path that we're talking about? Because of the lack of education, the lack of funding. And so they replace learning with entertainment.
Yeah, I think these are hard conversations. I think we have probably different perspectives on it.
Right.
I'll start with the last comment and then rotate to the first, or the last question and rotate to the first. You know, I think we have to be very careful with perpetuating the narrative that black fathers are not in the household.
Okay.
The CDC did a study, and I think it's probably 10 years old or so now, and they dismissed what they called this myth. They said, you know, black fathers, as compared to the other father groups, are more involved in their children's life. And if they are missing, they're missing for things that are out of their control, like incarceration.
Okay.
So which rotates back to our first question. Now, I think somebody might say, well, when you were doing whatever it is that incarcerated you, you should have been thinking about the consequences to your children. And there is a fair position to that is a fair position, or at least a reasonable position to take. But then again, we've got to rotate back to the question of, are black individuals doing the same conduct as other people's, but finding themselves incarcerated while other people's find themselves getting diversion programs and other things, right? But when black fathers are around, at least the CDC, who I believe are the experts, and so I take them at the word of their stuff. They said this is a myth. We tend to be more engaged when we are there, and again, when we're not there, is for reasons that are generally beyond our control. Now, you can dispute those conclusions or not if you want to. I think there is certainly room for us to be, as black men,
more engaged.
I think there is room for that. I think we are. I think the myth of black fathers lacking, though, is used to perpetuate discrimination against us. Because oftentimes I want to know, where are the fathers when I see young men attacking police officers as they try to raid the Capitol? Where are the white fathers there, right? But nobody says there's a white father problem, right?
Right.
I want to understand where were the white fathers when there's people in Charlottesville and they're having this makeshift racial rally, right, with tiki torches, trying to intimidate communities, where are the white fathers at there, right? That's not, but nobody makes that narrative about them. But yes, we should be, black fathers should be, there should be a narrative that we are the people that go above and beyond. Sort of like there's that narrative about black mothers, right?
Right.
It's sort of a known thing. Black mothers are there to the very end as the ship is going down. And so because of the traumas we face, there is room for us. We should have that. It should be the greatest fathers in the world of black fathers, because we know what the world is going to throw at black boys as they become men. Now, to your first question, which is about sort of entertainment, I've thought about this question for a long time, and about the content of some of the entertainment that we create. Now, I think you first have to acknowledge that the content we create is shared by everyone.
Right.
Everybody listens to black music.
Right.
Everybody looks at what we do. We set what is cool.
Right.
Our black athletes and stuff. So if you're saying that our culture is damaging, that if we're saying that black entertainment is damaging the black community, well, why is it not having an effect on the other communities that are consuming our entertainment? But so that's one question, and I think you can't really. You might have a lot of reasons to say why there's a difference, but there's a quote by Terrence Howard. Obviously, Terrence Howard, Hustle and Flow, and
Best Man,
the Empire, all those. So kind of well-known black actor. I think he was on The Breakfast Club, and he was talking about why he loved acting and what he thought was beautiful about acting. And he said, being an actor allows me to explore the full range of human experience. He said, if you, and I forgot the actor that was in Hannibal Lecter. Or he said, he was using a couple actors as an example. He said, there is somewhere in Denzel Washington, there is Alonzo from Training Day. Mm-hmm. If there wasn't, he would not be believable on the screen. Right. Somewhere inside of him exists that man. And Denzel Washington gets to explore that. He gets to explore being this gangster cop, this notorious, this sort of dirty cop. And then guess what? At the end of the day, he gets to go home and doesn't have to experience the consequences of being in that lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And so that he said, so acting allowed people to see the full range of human experience and to engage with that without the consequences of it. And that's the same thing when I'm driving, when I'm at the gym, mm-hmm. and I'm listening to trap music, right? And everything that goes along with that, drill music that has violence and it has drugs and it has all these things. That's just a part of me exploring the human experience without dealing with this full range of consequences. People want to take rappers and somehow black rappers get treated as if they're perpetuating sort of negativity, but nobody treats actors that way, right? When you go watch a movie, nobody says Denzel Washington is a problem because he portrayed Alonzo. Right. And so rappers are artists. Sometimes they don't portray themselves as that way, but they're artists. Most of these guys some of these guys, at least I won't say most, but some of these guys have went to Juilliard and other places like that. But some of them also, spend a huge portion of their day with a pen and pad and are doing similes and metaphors and literary devices with the best writers that you would ever know. And so I don't agree that somehow they're perpetuating this negativity. They are just letting people, bankers, doctors, lawyers are listening to this music and they're taking themselves to a different part of their experience and then they're going on with their day. And so I just don't agree with the rap is bad narrative that gets perpetuated.
Okay.
So it might be who these kids are looking up to. You know, when they walk out of their house and they see that drug dealer riding around in his car, nice car, he got everything that they look at. You know what I'm saying? So as the youth, like the teenagers, they see him and what he got, and that's what they want, and they seeing how he doing it. So as far as the young people, I think that's where it comes from. You know, they want the designer clothes and so when they see the local drug dealer in their neighborhood wearing it, you know, that's how well, I got to do this to get it. They don't see another way out.
Yeah. So I would say, piggybacking off what you're saying, the issue lies with, I'm gonna call it lazy parenting. And what I mean by that is, I remember when NWA came out,
Mm-hmm.
my mom did everything she could to make sure that I wasn't listening to that music.
Oh yeah.
But because of, your friend circle, you still have a way to get your hands on that music. But in doing so, because my mother was involved, she taught me the difference between entertainment and life. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking that's what's lacking in a lot of our households is they listening to this music, but the parents also listen to it, but nobody's explaining to them like the consequences. And in a lot of cases, when these young men, you can suffice when a lot of these young men, when the consequences fall on them, they don't have a clue what to do next.
Yeah.
Most of them speak before they even get an opportunity to be represented. From casual conversation you and I had, a lot of times, when you get there, they've already set themselves in a trap. Mm-hmm. And the best thing that can be done for them at that point is see if we can lessen the time. So I'm saying that to I remember parental guidance used to be on each and every label when we used to buy this music when we was younger. And the man behind the counter wouldn't sell it to you if he felt like you weren't old enough. But so I think these young minds are getting their hands on material that their young minds can't fathom or can't begin. They don't know how to express themselves. And this is the time of expression that is capturing these kids. Because if each one of us think from the ages of about 12 till about 17, we were trying to find ourselves. And so the culture has become fashion. And education is not even really personified in our communities anymore. And the reason why I talk about entertainment and how it's perceived, I remember the Cosby Show when I was young. Every Thursday, we sat down and tuned in, and it was more like a family environment. Then it was followed up by a different world, and in a different world, it was like a movement of young black people wanting to get education and go to HBCUs. So that's why sometimes I say entertainment has influence when there's lazy parenting.
Well, I mean, I think NWA is an interesting example because when there were people protesting left and right their criticism of the police, and maybe their criticism of the police was said in a way that it was obviously said in a way to get people's attention. Mm-hmm. But now what? So that's the 90s. So what's that?
Yeah, late 80s, mid 80s, late 80s.
Late 80s, so mm-hmm. Now we're saying 30 years later, mm-hmm. We've had the Black Lives Matter movement and several movement, George Floyd movement, and now we have had a completely shifting on our view oftentimes, people used to out of hand believe a law enforcement officer's story about what happened or did not happen. And now communities across the country, white, black, have much more willingness to question what law enforcement does. And so something that people would have said, this narrative about the entertainment, this has gone crazy, they're a bad example for our kids. Now, 30 years later, they were, like young prophets. I do think, obviously, I still agree that things happen. The home is where the genesis of your values are, and the understanding of what's entertainment and what's not. But I think we have to be very careful about simple answers. It is just so easy to turn inward and look at personal decision when I still think most of what we see is by design. It's just by design.
Mhm. And okay, being an interpreter or a narrator of the courtroom, when you walk in, and most of the time I'll say you're the minority when you walk in the courtroom as far as representation and fighting for justice. When you walk in and you see a white judge, you see your opposition as a white lawyer, and you have a black client, do you feel at that point that then everything's stacked against you? And do you feel like how hard do you have to fight to even get a fair trial? Like, do you have to paint such a vivid picture of what happened to feel like you can even acquire justice?
Yeah, I mean, look, going into these courtrooms, it is a very difficult experience, and it does oftentimes feel like a complete uphill battle. It often feels like you're the only thing standing between your client, just sort of being crushed by the system. I had a case just recently where I was reviewing the videos where they were talking with my client, and a police officer said to my client, 2 white people are dead, and the solicitor, the prosecutors are pressing me for results. And then he highlighted to the young man that he was going to go in front of a jury, and it was going to be all white or close to it, because he said that's who serves on juries. And it is true that you're almost always, at least where I practice in South Carolina, going to be sitting in front of a white judge. And so it does feel like that there are all these sort of forces acting against you. Now, not every white judge is a racist. Not every white judge, but a lot of times there are some, and the system does not have a good way of dealing with judges who I think have racial animosity, because the only real way, you have to ask them to recuse themselves, right? So that's not very helpful. But outside of there's, I would say, at least where I practice, there's only a couple of those really bad apples. But what you get all the time is people who simply cannot understand other people's lived experience, right?
Right.
So it is difficult for some people, oftentimes our white brothers in the justice system, to understand an unwillingness to want to talk to law enforcement. So someone may be experience or have a violent action happen in front of them or to them, but still not believe that it is an option really to call law enforcement, that it is as likely when they call law enforcement that law enforcement is going to try to shape the story to make them the bad actor. And so they just choose not to engage with law enforcement. So, but that's not something that is a lived experience for a 45-year-old, 50-year-old, 60-year-old white male who has a law degree, who's never been arrested, who every time he's talked to law enforcement, it's been collegial, it's been respectful, right? Even black males who are educated, become professionals, become even wealthy, most of us will still have a time where we've experienced being demeaned or disrespected by a law enforcement officer, and being sort of reminded that we're less than. And so that's a part of our experience naturally, and that's not part of a lot of the jurors' experiences or the judge's experience. So you're already at a deficit because you're trying to just get them to understand you and your lived experience. I mean, in the same way I often talk to my friends, I mean, we sort of know it. I mean, you'll have the white community does not have to be fluent in right. the black community.
Right.
Right. They see the entertainment, they engage with us through entertainment, sometimes athletics, and then brief interactions in the community, but they can just stay in their world while we have to be really fluent because we are forced to enter their world.
Right.
And so we know more about their world than they ever know about our world.
Right.
And then they don't know what they don't know, but here they are judging. They're the one ultimately deciding once you enter into the criminal justice system what your fate is. And so I just try to that's why I try to explain that those dynamics to any young person. Like, you just don't want to enter into the justice system at all if you can avoid it, because systemically, it is not fair to us.
With that being said, do you think that the entertainment, as far as what you see on TV and that what's portrayed with our movies and our music, they don't know us personally? So with what they see on TV, and then that young man walk in the courtroom looking like what they seen on TV, do you think that play a factor in just that general, what's the word I'm looking for?
General perception.
Yeah, that's, man, I lost my train of thought. But
No, I understand completely. Now, again,
stereotype. There you go.
No, I think that's one sort of explanation we could create. But no, I tend not to believe that, because, and I'm not somebody for respectability politics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Martin Luther King got food thrown on him in a 3-piece suit, right?
Yeah.
So the civil rights, the people, the thousands, millions of people who participated in the civil rights movement, they oftentimes did that, right? They oftentimes worked extra hard to appear to be the best version of what a black person could be, and they were still denigrated and disrespected. And that wasn't very long ago.
Right.
I gave an award this week to a woman by the name of Kitty Black Perkins, who's from Spartanburg. She designed the first black Bart at Mattel. And we gave her the key to the county. That was in 1980. That was the first time there was a black Barbie, 1980. My mama grew up my mama went to elementary school in a segregated school. Now, my great-grandma, not some turn of the century thought, like, these people are still living. Like, it has been a very short time since people were actively, through law, making black people less than other folk. So to the ultimate question, no, I don't think it's because people see some image on TV, because they know what acting is. Yeah. They know what artistry is. They know that every time somebody's screaming about having a broken heart, they didn't recently get a broken heart, right? In some country music song. Right. So they also know that the person talking about being a gangster is creating a form of art. Right. Just like when we had all that conversation about Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter, and people spent so much time trying to get the message across that just because you say Black Lives Matter doesn't mean you're saying other people don't matter. Right. But we all went to the same schools, guys. Right. The folks that were making that argument about All Lives Matter know what metaphor and simile is, and they know about literary devices. Like, they're pretending to not know. And so the idea that people get on TV and point at black culture as a way of discriminating against us is just feigned. It's just pretended, in my opinion.
A reinforced excuse, if you want to say.
Say it again?
A reinforced excuse.
Yes.
For them to do what they do.
What they want to do.
Right.
Which is, oftentimes create advantages for themselves, because they don't want to compete against us.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's that, in other words, like, and this is a question that off key a little, but you're saying for them to compete. So these are narratives and these are laws, and like, say for example, the grandfather clause and all the things that we would contribute to holding us back then. Do you say that even now, I know these practices would still be taking place. And what I mean by that is, we spoke about a white kid on campus doing the same thing that a black kid would do, but he would leave that, still leave with a degree and still be able to operate in his degree without any effects of or consequences for the crime he may have committed. So in saying so, basically what I'm trying to say is, do you feel that systemically that those policies are a form of evolution to still make way to hold us down and keep us out of the competition for the things that they feel like we shouldn't have, to lessen us?
Well, I think I do believe that there's systemic oppression and discrimination, and that if you drill down to why it's occurring, it is about allowing who is going to have the easiest path to success, financial success or otherwise. I think a part of what has not been really discussed post-slavery, I believe that there were many people who went into the marketplace and were successful with businesses, and then received kind of racial reprisals for it, were lynched, were attacked, were run out of town, received violence. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't anything about it. And the story that's sort of repeated now is, well, they whistled at a white woman, or they did. Right. Well, no, really what they were they were successful. Correct. In the market. They were operating businesses and entering into entrepreneurial endeavors that then was competing with majority businesses. Mm-hmm. And so racial caste was used to enforce, to kind of get rid of market participants. And then what that trauma did over and over again, with more and more of these examples happening throughout communities, right? That trauma taught people of color that we shouldn't be market participants. We shouldn't be entrepreneurs. We shouldn't be business owners. It is safer for us to be workers, right? And then, now you might not know those stories in your family, but what you do know is that grandmama said, go work at the local mill. Right. Grandmama said, go work at the warehouse, go work, because, or go find a government job, right? Right. That it's got good benefits. Because what trickled down, even though the original story was lost, what trickled down to in our communities was, it is best not to be competing with majority structures. It is best to work within those structures. That is what's safe. Right. And so then you wonder why in some communities, like a Spartanburg, South Carolina, that people don't have we don't have a culture of entrepreneurship. We're trying to create that culture. Now, there's also in Spartanburg, South Carolina, there's sort of a culture. There's not a white culture of entrepreneurship either, because it was an old mill community. Right. And so some of those experiences crossed over into other communities, right? Is where everybody worked for a couple families, a couple group of people, that type of thing. But there are traumas, again, that we don't know the story. We don't know the full story. All we know is the effect, which is grandmama and mama said, go, start a business. You don't start a business. Right. You go work for somebody. Right. That's what your role is. But that's what's going to keep you safe. Right.
So I'm gonna step back a minute to when you was talking about the 80s. Like, so with the with politics, looking at that political, do you think that if those people, the Senate, if they were younger, the House of Representatives, if those are younger people, would that help us as far as the laws? I mean, I can't.
More along the lines of, like, you think the younger group, they're more engaged. They're more in
tune with us.
Yeah, they're more engaged.
You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of those people that you see, they older and they still live in those racist ways.
Yeah, like, so basically what you're saying is, like, the time frames.
Yeah.
Most of our older politicians were born and reared in an era where racism was considered the political climate, where it was okay to just be abruptly racist, versus the younger generation where they're exposed, like they went to school with us, they've engaged with us a little more, so they may be a little more understanding of our lifestyle and our situation, and they can make better judgments versus someone who doesn't have an understanding of us, who grew up in an era where it was totally separate, and they're the ones that's making laws and they're the ones that's making judgments. That's kind of like what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, I think it cuts both ways. I mean, look, I think Joe Biden, he's old. He's an older person, but I think he's a friend of communities of color. I think Jim Clyburn is an older person. He's probably the most, he's our congressman in South Carolina, and he's probably the most powerful person of color in the country. Nancy Pelosi was an older person. So I think it can cut both ways. I certainly believe in my own experience that there are people who remember a time when they walked on the sidewalk and we had to get off the sidewalk, and those people are still living. That is not that far into our past. Mm. Those, like I said, my mom, who's 64, went to a segregated school. When you were going through segregated schools, if you were walking down you tried not to walk. You didn't even think you could walk in a white community. And if somehow you crossed with a person, a white person, you had to get off the sidewalk. So there are people that have those memories. And then, so I do think that plays a role in how they engage with me when suddenly I'm supposed to be an authority figure and they don't think there's any decision that they've made, I have the right to question, right? So I think those things can play a role, but I don't think there's any sort of just broad decision. The broad just saying, well, the older generation has to move on, because there's a lot of older people of color who are still, in Spartanburg. There's not a lot of young people moving into the South Side which is a community of color. So there's still those same older people who fought those fights. They're still fighting those. They're still the ones holding it on and being champions, because the younger generation has not met their responsibility to take the baton yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So with your accolades and with the positions that you hold, not only in Spartanburg, but practicing law and things of that nature, how do you feel I know you personally, and I know what you've done to effectuate change, but how do you feel you use these platforms that you have to effectuate change? Like an example. I know one example, and I always tease you about you being the champion of Juneteenth, mm-hmm. because you enlightened me. I think it was 2015 mm-hmm. when you and I were discussing was it 2015, 2016? Mm-hmm. You were discussing Juneteenth then. And not many people were aware of what and I was surprised that you even brought it up, because I study our history a lot. Mm-hmm. And to hear somebody as profound and the way that you went to, I knew Spartanburg. I used to live in Spartanburg. So for you to start in Spartanburg and have the the city backing you and funding your push for Juneteenth, I mean, what other examples would you say that you brought to effectuate change and to bring light to our community that there's a problem?
Yeah, so Juneteenth is something I'm really proud of. 2015, 2016. Now, I wasn't the first person to ever do Juneteenth in Spartanburg, but we were the first. I was the first person to create a 501c3 organization and to get city, county government to treat it with seriousness. Before then, it had been kind of scattered celebrations, and those scattered celebrations went back to the early 2000s, probably even into the 90s. And so there's a lot of people that tried it, but when sort of the mantle of Juneteenth has sort of been dropped by the previous organizing groups, we said, no, we're going to go and make the city and the county take this seriously and fund it seriously. And we're going to make this something that we invest in the community, because in Spartanburg, we still are a majority Black city, but you couldn't find any sort of cultural event that was centered on people of color. You know, we had International Day, we had a Spring Fling, we even had stuff around Cinco de Mayo, and it was just like there was this kind of glaring oversight that we just don't have anything to celebrate our Black population. And so I've been extremely happy with that. You know, our county and our city now put a ton of money and effort into Juneteenth. And we're still, you know, Spartanburg Juneteenth Inc. primarily is that vehicle which the county puts its dollars, which is the organization that I still chair. But you asked about what are other things that I'm proud of. You know, wealth, Black, small and minority business has sort of been my focus over my first 4 years. And we allocated $6 million from the county government to small and minority business, and then we leveraged that to turn it basically into $16 million. And so that program is widespread, but you know, the part that most people focus on is the grants and loan pooling. That's about $10 million of that. And so we've gotten $2 million into the community, with 90% of that be going to entrepreneurs of color. And so that's the kind of thing that I you know, when we talk about what government can do, that's what the kind of programs that I want to focus on, because Atlanta is the perfect example. Atlanta is sort of the land of milk and honey for a Black entrepreneur. There's no ceiling. They have Russell Construction, which is the largest minority-owned construction company in the country, is headquartered out of Atlanta. Well, how did they get to be that? Well, they got to be that because of being a part of the creation of the Atlanta airport, right? And government requiring people to do business with small and minority businesses in particular. And so, and that story is all throughout the Black, you know, that Atlanta community. It was built through the power of government. And so I think it's important that government is a launching pad for our Black businesses. Oftentimes we don't talk about it, we don't hear about it, but there's so many times, I mean, going back to the GI Bill, that people of color were blocked out from way back. We're talking about in World War II, coming post World War II, post World War I stuff. From there we're also talking about tax subsidies for housing, building housing, and create so much of these businesses are launched and upscaled through the use of government power, but we don't talk about that. We don't think of it in the same way as the government helping people out, like when we talk about, say, food stamps or some other things, right? Government subsidizes and boosts private businesses all the time, and oftentimes it's just not doing it for entrepreneurs of color. So that program is called Power Up in Spartanburg. I thought it up. I got it through county council, which is, there's 6 other everybody else is a Republican, but we found a way to find common ground on it, and then we upsized it to the size it was, and now it's housed with our Chamber of Commerce.
Okay. And one thing you forgot to mention was how you've influenced some businesses to move into the area, on working with companies to try to move them to the area.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to us. I mean, we do economic development very well in Spartanburg County. We're the home of BMW and Milliken, and we've got a lot of distribution. I mean, we did $4 billion in investment in a community that's 300,000 people. $4 billion might not be a lot to Atlanta or Charlotte, but it's a huge amount for the size of the community we did. And so we work collaboratively. We have a very good team, and we're doing we're bringing a lot of companies in, especially the international ones. I mean, we're nationally per capita, we're on a national level and attracting international investment. And hopefully, we've worked hard. We've worked hard to bring companies. For me, I've wanted to bring back manufacturing to the Black community. The south side of Spartanburg, we had a we had a Pepsi company. Our Pepsi company left a big plant there, and we've been able to attract a manufacturer, automotive manufacturers to come. And it's really hard to get manufacturers into cities now because they need so much land and different things. But we talked at the very beginning about systematic discriminations or systemic problems that are the source of end issues. Well, one of the issues about crime and poverty is the end of the high paying, low education jobs that were once here. So manufacturing, it used to be you could be on like a longshoreman, right? Be unloading boxes from the dock, and you could be able to feed your family.
Right.
Well, those jobs went away in urban places, and then as they went away, you saw crime go up. Right. It's just a result of taking away, hollowing out those high earning jobs that did not require a ton of education, which allowed a man to go and provide for his family. Take those away, and you see rising domestic violence issues, you see rising crime issues, you see rising violence issues, and so those are connected. So I'm hoping to be able to bring manufacturing back in some of these urban settings, and then I think you will see other issues be alleviated.
I'm gonna ask you. I remember the young man walking into the barbershop with a book. And at the time, you weren't my client. You was going to Warren. And seeing you grow from that young man who walked in the shop, reading a book, to finishing grad school, getting your law degree, passing the bar, hypothetically, I heard the first time. So just seeing your growth into the person that you've become, like, what are your end goals now? Like, do you plan on just remaining in city government, or do you have larger endeavors to possibly state house and beyond?
Yeah, absolutely. I have many goals that go beyond just the political. Certainly, the business. I have many of those type of goals with my business and my law practice. But yeah, I do plan on running for the state house. District 31 is the state house where I live at. District 1, South Carolina State House, and I plan on running in the next term. So that's not until the election wouldn't be until June 2026. So just a little bit over 2 years away, but I expect to be in that race. And there's currently an incumbent there, and I certainly don't. I wish her all the best, but I don't think she's producing the kind of results that I would want to see from my community. I'm just not happy with those results, and so I plan on putting my name in for office, for further office.
Okay, and now this is what I personally want to know is, like, most of the time people who look like us get involved in the law. They get involved, lawyers, judges, police officers, etc. Our community has a negative connotation on you guys. How did you champion and win people to support you the way that you have? I mean, was it just being genuine or dealing with the issues of the everyday people and not only speaking on it, but actually bringing some of these things to life?
I would say I think that is true to a certain degree, especially with law enforcement. I think law enforcement has a difficult relationship with the Black community, but I have always found people to be positive about me being a lawyer. I know my white colleagues, I think they deal with a lot of lawyer jokes and a lot of denigration of the profession, or ambulance chaser, whatever, that kind of talk. But I've never experienced that in in our community, because I believe there's still, the narrative that came out of the civil rights movement for us were pastors, activists, lawyers, who were the people that were getting the kids out, who were activists when they were whether it was lawyers. There was lawyers helping, Thurgood Marshall, that type of figure. But I do think that there is sometimes distrustfulness that, like, oh, okay, here's the guy in the suit and tie, here's the politician, black person, and that person can sometimes be distrusted. But all you have to do is just be you, and you live in the community, you go to church in the community, you work with people, you're just a regular person. Like I said, well, we started like this. We started this pod talking about incarceration. I deal with that same stuff in my family that you do, and so that's never been a huge issue for me.
Okay.
I generally believe, I'm generally been trusted by folk, and you just got to be real. You got to tell the truth, and stick by your word, mean what you say what you mean.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to take up much more of your time, but I do have one question I want to ask in closing. Like, most of the leaders that you spoke of, they all came from all black schools. And you, coming from an integrated educational system, how did you develop your sense of morality and your sense of, just from talking to you, I could see that I don't want to put a stigma that's going to put a negative connotation out, but you thrive to see people of our community succeed. Like, I see, like, when Martin Luther King, when all our leaders, they were for the black plight. They were for our communities to succeed and to thrive and to compete with our counterparts. Where did you develop that sense of it? Because since I'm kind of putting you on a platform of these leaders, because your perception, your views, your ability to thrive, your foresight, things that you see that need to be fixed from the inside. Like, where did you develop that? Because they had black schools that pushed it, but we were in integrated schools. And, like, how did you find that space?
Well, sorry, my mother was an NAACP investigator, and so she brought that experience to me. I became the president of the Spartanburg branch of NAACP as a young person. So she was involved. My mom, was from Memphis, Tennessee. She worked on Harold Ford seniors campaigns. Harold Ford was, a congressman who then passed his seat on to Harold Ford Jr., and Harold Ford Jr. for a long time was sort of the leader of the Blue Dog Democrats, ran for the Senate. So she had those experiences. She passed those on to me. So that's always where the grounding came from in my household on these sort of issues. And I am phenomenally happy to see HBCUs having a renaissance right now. It's kind of a moment. But, people, my mom's fond of saying is black folks the same all over, so wherever schools you go to, and you're going to face some of the same issues and have to delve into them. And so it started in the household, but it's just been continued because, these are issues that affect me. And this is a place that I've wanted to put my energy.
Very well said. Well, I want to thank everybody for their time today, and most definitely
Thank you, brother.
for your insight.
Yes, sir.
and the knowledge that you shared, and I hope that we can use this to push you out there even more, to like put your name in the ears of people, not only in your community, but when you hit the national level. Because talking to you, your vision is beyond South Carolina. It's going to land you bigger places. So I hope that this right here can help propel you to where now a national audience understands that when you run, you're a man that's going to stand on your word.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir.